Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What's happening, everyone?
And we got Stevie Buckets.
What's up, guys?
Steve, a little bit more enthusiasm.
What's up?
Oh, jeez.
He's wore out from football.
I am.
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use. And thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us. Tom at realrecoverytalk.com and Ben at realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message, right, Ben?
That is correct.
What's up, Steve?
Oh, not much. End of the day. Excited to be on the podcast.
You sure don't sound like it.
I'm stoked.
Okay.
I'm stoked. I'm really very excited.
How's things been going in your world?
They're great.
Okay.
Life's good, man.
We like having Steve on because it's a good, well, first off, he does NA. So it's like a different kind of spin on things, you know? He's, how could I best word this? Well, I don't know. But anyway, Steve, we invited him on the podcast because the topic for today is something that I felt like Steve could definitely add value to. And yeah, so I'm just going to start ranting, Ben and Steve, and you'll know when to interrupt. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Here we go.
So we've had, we've been open now going on 10 years. And we've treated in those 10 years probably, I don't know, a couple thousand people, I would venture to say, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. You know, we average somewhere about 150 people a year, right?
Yeah, it falls between 100 and 150. I know the last couple of years were around 116, 125. Stuff
Yeah. And, lo and behold, for us, we are a very pro-client facility. In other words, we want the clients, we're going to advocate for the clients 110%, even when they can't advocate for themselves in the beginning. But at some point in time, we expect that tide to turn, right? And we have to do less advocating for the client because the client is advocating for themselves at this point. And very rarely do we have situations and instances where we have to ask a client to leave, and that would be called an administrative discharge. So us as a staff, we basically have decided that this client is no longer, either fit for our program or they're not putting in the effort that is necessary. And honestly, because the amount of people that we treat, which is somewhere between 20 and 25, generally on average, if you don't want to be here, then somebody else does, because we have such a small amount of beds. Generally speaking, there's always somebody waiting in the wings to have your bed. And go ahead, Ben.
Let me chime in right there, too, because I literally just had a phone call with somebody about this. A potential client, someone that's never done treatment before. And I was kind of explaining to him, like, while you don't need to necessarily be jumping for joy that you're going to rehab, I was kind of explaining to him, like, what willingness do you have? What open-mindedness do you have? Like, what is it, if you did come here, that you would be looking to get out of this? Because it's one of those situations where parents are very heavily influencing. And I do think that this is a case that needs it. Like, if you ask me black and white, does this kid qualify for needing treatment? I would definitely say yes. But, while we're not necessarily jumping for joy to go to treatment, going off of what you're talking about, I think it's important to talk about the stages of change, right, so to speak. And I just want to throw it out there that, like, everybody comes in here in a different spot. And some part of our job is not just taking care of the ones that want to be here. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes a lot of the times we get clients here, they're like, I need and I want rehab. Let's do this thing. But then sometimes we get somebody that's in like the contemplation stage. And as professionals in the field, we're also here to help them guide through that. I actually pulled up the 5 stages of change on my phone. I'm going to go clinical nerd here for a second.
Go ahead. I'll try not to fall asleep.
Yeah, they'll be super proud of me, Maya and Nicole and Jennifer and them, right? Hannah. But stage 1 is pre-contemplation, stage 2 contemplation, 3 is preparation determination, 4 is action and willpower, and 5 is maintenance.
Yeah.
So, it is also our job, like if you're ever a parent trying to get your kid or loved one into a program, it's not a huge deal if they are like, I don't know about this. Mm-hmm. The thing that I really wanted to emphasize with this family and with the gentleman I spoke to, the young man that I spoke to on the phone, was like, hey, dude, I'm not some white coat professional here. Like, I'm just a dude, right? And like, I think we really hit it off on that. And just some he said to me, you sound like somebody I could talk to. I'm like, yeah, that's my intention. I'm a junkie, dude. And it just wanted to touch on that, the willingness of people coming in, because I know where you're going with all this.
Yeah, and we'll get there. But I like this. I like that direction that you're going. Steve, what do you got?
Well, I have like this equation I have in my head in general, like my philosophy behind like willingness of the client and like our part in that. In my head, and this is very general, like your MPHP level of care will meet you 75% of the way. IOP level of care, it's more kind of 50-50. And then like the OP level of care, that's like you're 75%, the client's 75%, it's his responsibility. And we'll be there kind of almost in that right before the maintenance stage. You know what I'm saying? Because then they're transitioning to more of an aftercare situation. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, we see people all the time, though, like they need their hands held like throughout the whole thing. And at a certain point, you got to get out the nest. I don't know if you're going this direction with the parents and stuff, you know what I mean, in terms of letting us kind of take over and do our job so they can get to that level. And a lot of the parents, they want to be there throughout the whole time, you know, and they kind of want to be like co-therapists and co-administrators or whatever, what have you. You know what I'm saying? Of what we're kind of doing.
Yeah, that is a big part of what I wanted to bring up. The two parts of this. So we have from the client aspect, and then you have from the parent aspect, and oftentimes they are misaligned in some capacity. And for us, depending on the nature of the relationship, we have a harder time dealing with the parents than we do with the particular client. Mm-hmm. And there have been instances where we've had conversations with parents and have had to say, if you're not willing to sever communication with your loved one, then we're not going to treat them anymore. Because it goes back to what I said at the very beginning. It doesn't matter how much a client wants to be here. They could want to be here and know in their mind that, like, I'm in a good place, so on and so forth. And they could say all that stuff and do all the right things while they're here. But as soon as they leave here and go back to the housing or whatever, and they get on the phone with their parents, the parents can derail everything that this client is doing and all the work that they're doing. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because this has happened on a few different occasions with some groups of parents and children and spouses and their spouse, you know? And I think that we don't talk about it enough. We oftentimes focus on the addict themselves and more the therapeutic, like, you know, the inner workings of treatment. And you get to hear experiences from clients that have come through here and people that are just sober, so on and so forth. We talk about it, but I think it deserves more discussion on how quickly a loved one can absolutely screw everything up. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to hear that because in their mind, it is, they're so used to having control over this person, whoever the person is in treatment, that it clouds their judgment. And most of the time, when parents have these sort of controlling issues and we tell them, hey, go to Al-Anon, hey, find a support group that you can bounce this stuff off of. 9 times out of 10, they don't go. And those that do go end up telling us thank you, but they actually sometimes do the opposite. rather than going to Al-Anon where we know that they're going to hear the message of, I need to disconnect from this. I need to see how I can look at myself and fix myself. Rather than doing that, they end up finding other parents and other spouses or whatever the case is that end up co-signing their bullshit. You know, like, you are right. You are right to feel that way. And you should tell your son or your daughter or your husband or your wife how it is, and so on and so forth. And then they get, like, yes, I am right. I am right. Meanwhile, it contradicts everything that we would suggest and that we would tell them to do. It's like, I can find anybody to co-sign my BS. If I look hard enough and if I, search, I can find somebody to co-sign it. But I know with you guys, like, you would be my support group. And that's what you guys are utilized for, as my support group. And if I truly want to grow, and if I truly want to, say I had somebody in treatment and you were my Al-Anon friends, and I go to the Al-Anon meeting and say my son, let's, project 15 years from now, Levi's in treatment. And I come to you guys and I say, hey, listen, this is what I think I'm going to do, so on and so forth, that blah, blah, blah. You guys, I trust that you're going to give me sound advice. But a lot of times with parents, they don't want to hear it, or they'll pretend like they hear it and it just goes in one ear and out the other, and then derails everything that client is doing. And it's disgusting, and it pisses me off.
Tom, I want to use your line. I've heard you say this to parents a million times, but Tom will say, we're going to ask you to take a back seat until we invite you into this process.
Yeah.
Because we do want families involved. Like, we have our family weekend here, which has a very intentional structure and curriculum, so to speak, in the way that we guide it. Steve's a big part of that. You could probably speak to this. But there are times when, like, sometimes we have to bring parents in, then push them back out a little, then bring them back in a little bit, and kind of adjust as we go. But there's definitely some families out there, and this is the one that I'm always riddled by. I mean, I get it. It doesn't surprise me anymore. But for instance, a parent will be funding the treatment, but then they'll say, well, I'm paying for it. I want to know that this is what they're doing. I'm like, why did you pay Rock, so to speak, or the treatment facility, so that you can implement what you want to implement? You're literally, if you're doing this correctly, you're paying the funding for treatment to let somebody else have a game plan and use their professionalism.
I've used this analogy with many people that pay out of pocket with this, or that pay out of pocket for their loved one to be in treatment here, which it's not cheap, right? If somebody wants to come here, it's not cheap. And nor should it be. If you want cheap, you can go find somewhere that's cheap. It is what it is. But I tell them this. When I'll ask them oftentimes, do you have a 401k? Yeah, I have a 401k. Do you have, sometimes they don't, and this analogy falls flat on its face, and then I have to come up with another one. But do you invest in the stock market? Yeah, I invest in the stock market. Do you have a financial advisor? Yeah, I have a financial advisor. When you tell your financial advisor, hey, I want to invest, $500, do you tell them how to invest it? Well, no, I really just trust that they know what they're doing and that they're going to take my $500 and they're going to give me the best rate of return in which they believe that is going to work. That is exactly what is taking place here. When you're investing money into something, you're paying us because you trust that we know better than you. And you're not going to invest money to your financial advisor and say, here's my $500 and this is exactly what I want you to do with it. Because at that point, what the hell do you need a financial advisor for? Just download an app on your phone and invest the money. And parents are like, oh, that does make sense. And so I set like an upfront contract with them. And I know that there's a few moms right now listening that have done a phenomenal job at this. I'll tell them like exactly what you said. Stay as uninvolved as humanly possible until otherwise told so or invited in the process. In other words, if your son or daughter is calling you saying that they're hiking up Military Trail and F this place, I'm leaving, yeah, that would constitute give me a call. Let me know what's going on. But if you want to call me to just, make some sort of suggestion like, hey, Johnny really likes wheat bread. So, try and have some wheat bread there instead of white bread, on the nights that you order dinner. Like, no. Okay. And that in those situations, it has nothing to do with the bread, and it has everything to do with, because the follow-up question is, oh, well, how's Johnny doing since we're on the phone? And it's like, I see what you did there. You call with what you deem a necessary piece of information that I need, which now it tries to follow up with a 20-minute phone call, and you're trying to get information out of me. And it's a control issue. And it's like...
It's manipulating.
And let me make this part clear. Like, we don't mind, like, if a parent's calling. Like, that's not what this is about.
No.
It comes down to what Steve and Tom just said. They have a hard time letting go of control in those old habits.
Yeah.
I think when you mentioned family weekend, what's so important about it is, there's so many different reasons it's important, but in terms of like the dialogue in a positive, healthy, appropriate space. Also, it's the loved one is here for a reason. We'll say we're using it sounds like we're using someone from between 18 and 25, let's say. So we'll say the kid. The kid's here for a reason. The family structure, and I'm not criticizing parents at all. Like, no, there's no perfect family, but they probably didn't come from a healthy environment. This is on a spectrum, but they didn't just trip and fall into like their drug of choice. There's reasons. There was toxicity probably, and that's okay. That's like, okay, they're here to heal, and family weekend, when we have that, it's kind of, that brings the parents in to start healing along with the loved one as well, But like, I think it's important for parents to realize that, and that takes a little humility, a little like dropping the ego a little bit, that because it's hard to be like, oh, I didn't, the best I can type of thing. Again, I'm not blaming parents, you know what I'm saying? Like, as an addict myself, I like to get high, my family wasn't perfect by any means, and they tried their best. But at the end of the day, there was communication issues, there was control issues, there was fear issues. There was a lot of issues, anger issues. So I think when you look at that in that respect, it's like, okay, we got to do a whole almost restart type situation, And if if the behaviors are still the same, just the only difference is, little Johnny or whatever isn't using, like, if that's the only difference, like, it's going to be real hard to be successful in this process, in my opinion.
Yeah. The parents, they make it so much harder on themselves. And something that you said that I want to address, and because you said it twice, and I agree with you for the most part, is I'm not blaming the parents. And sometimes I am. And I think they deserve the blame, because we as a facility see the progress that so-and-so could be making or that is making. But again, as soon as they leave these four walls, the next day they're somebody completely different. And it's like, well, what happened in 12 hours? You were saying this yesterday, and now today it's completely different. And I have a specific scenario in my head, which is why I'm going off on this to begin with.
There's been two recently that were very much, two cases like this pretty recently, where I'll just be frank about it. The parents were literally on the back end undoing the work that we were doing.
Yeah. Undoing everything.
And obviously, like, we won't use names and stuff. I think to just give context and be point blank, for instance, we had a client that made it to our lower levels of care. The parent took him on a little weekend vacation, which was approved and everything. And the parent actually took them to the bar to drink.
Yeah.
And then they come back here.
And they just went to family weekend.
And they come back here with alcohol in their system. And the parents are like, what's wrong with that?
I thought it was drugs that you were treating, not alcohol. It's like
the old adage: you can bring a horse to water, but you can't get them to drink. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, just you have to let go. It's like what we do in recovery in the 12 steps. We got to surrender.
Yeah.
percentage to process. And like what I was saying with the family, it's not necessarily your fault. You don't know what you don't know. Obviously, some families are completely very unhealthy, but I'm speaking generalities. But it's almost like if someone's never been exposed to AA or NA before, to any of the 12-step fellowships, and they come in, like I give them a little bit of a grace period, and I'm like, oh, you didn't know, now you know. So it's almost like with the families, if they had really bad, really bad family system before, but now we're letting them know it. Now they got to let go, kind of thing. Now there is not a lot of excuses there,
To Steve's point too, like I want to kind of paint a picture where families all do look different. Mm-hmm. And for instance, you may have the family that's obviously toxic. And the reason that I just gave the very specific example I gave was because that does exist.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, just as an example, you may have the family that's like, we provided our kid with the best opportunity ever. White picket fence, the dog, grew up in a good neighborhood, could go to any college he wanted to, and we paid for it. Great education that we provided, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what you'll see, for instance, is what families don't realize is maybe that addict was completely neglected because to be able to provide that stuff, maybe the parent was like a workaholic, mm-hmm. and they maybe kind of raised themselves, and the only way that they could get, approval is by hitting these academic accomplishments, so to speak, and just the constant pressure of, well, dad went to an Ivy League school, and if I don't do exactly what dad did, can you imagine growing up with that pressure? And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Very different on the outside, but the reality of the situation is again, we're not blaming the family because we've seen all walks of life, mm-hmm. and all sorts of family dynamics. There was something that got us to the point where we're at, that generally speaking, that the alcoholic or addict is drinking or drugging to feel better about.
Yeah. Well, and the thing with, again, I know and this is something that we're very passionate about because, we in the end, we care a lot about the people that we treat, and we want them to be successful in every capacity, not only in their sobriety, but in every aspect of their lives, including their relationships. And that's why we are bringing this up today, because there's been a recent instance where it was very apparent that who are we treating? Are we treating the client or are we treating the parents? And basically had to make a decision as a staff that I'll speak for myself. I was speaking to this client, and I'm sitting there and I'm talking to this person, and I notice myself trying to talk him into staying. And I'm thinking to myself, why? Mm-hmm. Why am I doing this again for the second or third time in 2 weeks? Because it had happened probably 4 days prior and everything was fine. But then as soon as, he gets on the phone with parents, it's back to the same thing. And this person kept saying, I want to have a sense of independence. I want to have a sense of independence. And so in that discussion, I had picked up on this, and I think to myself, I'm like, I'm trying way too much, a lot harder for this than he is. And I'm definitely trying a lot harder than what the parents are. And so I actually made a conscious decision right there. I said, what do you want to do? Do you want to leave or do you want to stay? Oh, I don't know. Man, I don't really know, he says. I said, you need to make a decision right now. And I did that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I want to go, he says. I want to leave. Sounds good. We got your discharge paperwork ready to go, and let's make this happen. And that was it. And I knew in that very moment that I felt like I was speaking on behalf of all the staff, because I know we were kind of all in the same place. We made the right decision, Because what ultimately is going to happen, and I even told this, I said, this is how this is going to go. You're going to leave here and you're going to call your parents and you're going to tell them that we kicked you out, and you're going to try and manipulate your way back to getting, some sort of grace from your parents, and they're probably going to bail you out. And then you're going to fast forward 6 months from now, and you're still going to be doing the same exact thing that you were doing just 3 weeks ago when you called. Remember, Steve? It was me and you. Mm-hmm. You called us begging for help again. This was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're right. That's probably what's going to happen. And I said, and I said all that before I gave him the countdown. Mm-hmm. And then I said, what is it that you want to do? Did the countdown. He says, I want to go. But the thing that I liked about this, and I really hope he can follow through with this, he says, I don't know if I'm making the right decision or the wrong decision, but this is the only way I think I can have any sense of independence from my parents, is to prove them wrong. Mm-hmm. And I honestly, I was like, that is probably one of the most sensible things that I've heard you say thus far. And it makes sense, because up to that point, everything that was being done for this person, it was, I firmly believe it was for the parents. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know they love their kid and so on and so forth. And I'm not degrading the parents in any way. Again, what you don't know, you don't know. But in this specific instance, they knew. But it's that parental instinct, the draw. And again, easy for me to say my kids are 7, 5, and 3. Fast forward 10, 15 years from now, you put me in this situation, I don't know what I'll do.
I literally just said this to a parent this morning on the phone, explaining the situation. Like, I have a 13-year-old, I have a 5-year-old. I've told myself ahead of time, if I'm ever in a situation where my kid needs help with a substance use disorder, I am going to rely on another professional. Because even with all the knowledge and education and experience that I have, I'm emotionally compromised when it's my kid. I will do things for my kid that I would not do for anybody else on the face of the planet, and that would cloud my judgment. And that's just what it is. Like, I think one of the most important things a parent can do is take the step back and say, no matter what I've done to raise my kid right, and you may have not done anything wrong, realistically, and you're still in this situation. Something has to change. What is it that has to change? We might not know right now. But I need to get out of the way. I've told myself that already if I ever have to deal with this in the future.
So I want to wrap this up relatively soon, but I want to ask both of you.
Ask your question.
I wanted to ask both of you because you both have parents, obviously. Ben, and I know the answer to this, but I want you, for the sake of new listeners, at what point, what finally had to happen for you to make that change?
My folks went to Al-Anon, which was terrible. I always joke about it. Worst day of my life is the day that my mom went to Al-Anon and she dragged my dad with her.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they got out of the way. And my mom recently, I forget the timeline on this. It wasn't that long ago. I probably had 10 years sober. But she said to me, she basically along the line said, I found myself at peace for once. And she kind of accepted the fact like I was already dead. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, she's like, I came to the realization that if you were there and you were high, I was just going to say to myself, I'm going to spend the day with my son. He might be nodding out in front of me, drooling all over himself, eyes bloodshot red, pupils pinned, whatever the case is. I'm just going to enjoy this time with my son, because regardless of what she was doing, she realized that she couldn't control it. And she found peace in the fact, I'm not going to contribute to Ben's drug addiction, but when I'm with him physically, I'm going to enjoy that time with them regardless.
I like it. Steve?
It's funny, we kind of touched on it in group earlier. For me, it was just being completely, utterly exhausted. Just tired of it. I wasn't going in for my parents as much as it bummed me out how much I kind of betrayed their trust and how much I hurt them and how much they didn't to see me killing myself. I went in because I needed to get better. I felt like I had to do it for myself. And another pivotal moment too was they actually wanted to come see me while I was in treatment, and I had to set a boundary, and I said, I want to do this. I can't see you guys right now, because I knew the communication would be completely toxic. And a lot of you talk about family weekend, a lot of things we discuss in family weekend, like when you have discussions with your family, it's going to be with me, it's going to be with Maya, one of our therapists, a lot of the other therapists attend to, it's going to be with that. So it'll be, it'll be in a more therapeutic setting. Like they would have just, if I saw my parents and I know what it was, we would have been outside at my treatment center, like a little garden. It'd be like in a garden, us, and without any really no mediator. And I knew it would have been, and it would have been crazy. And I was like, I knew I was actually feeling momentum, like positive momentum for the first time that in a very, very long time. And I'm like, I didn't want to kind of jeopardize that. So I made a choice that this is my journey.
I don't know the answer to this. Did you go to treatment once?
I went twice.
Twice?
And the first time was my parents things were awful too, don't get me wrong, but like it was definitely for my parents, because I had in the back of my head, like, I'm not an addict. I just got to stop with the crack. I got to stop with the Oxycontin. I got to stop with the Roxys. But I do want to get back into the quote unquote fun drugs. You know what I'm saying? Like, and still like, how could I quit that the rest of my life without drugs? That seems insane.
Right.
So my motives weren't super. They were more, towards my family, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a quote: "When the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change, that's when we'll finally make that change." And I want to make it clear, like I brought up the stages of change earlier, because this is a process. Mm-hmm. As a facility, we don't jump right to, hey, you don't want to be here, have a good day. Like, we'll see you out. It's nothing like that. But we also, as a facility, have to realize when we are becoming the enabling parent as well. Like, we can't be hypocrites on our end and keep rescuing either. And once we've seen like an established pattern and tried to address it several times, we have to take the same advice that we give to the parents and loved ones. And the big book talks about this. It says that we may waste a later opportunity. And the way that I want to elaborate on that is, when you talk about the first step in recovery, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and drugs and that our lives had become unmanageable. I was taught that I did my first step out on the streets. I made the decision out there that I was powerless over alcohol and drugs. My life became unmanageable. Like, in other words, I did my research on that step before rehab. And sometimes people need more research. Mm-hmm. It's if you're coming in here, and again, going back to that quote I just said, like, and just repeating the same patterns, it's scary as a parent. And this is where a parent's fear comes in, because the reality of the situation is your kid going back out could be the last time. But at the same time, the other flip side to that is if you're denying them that experience and trying to shield them, then you're probably prolonging the inevitable of being out there longer, and the big book talks about that too. Any attempt to shield an alcoholic is doomed to fail. You cannot shield alcoholics and drug addicts from doing what they're going to do. You could be a parent who literally provided the perfect outcome, and somehow your kid ended up on drugs and alcohol. Like, and I really try to hit that point home. Let's quit looking at the why in the beginning, and let's just get them here and get them to see, through being a good example, through being an inspiration on, hey man, this way of life, dude, Steve loves it, Tom loves it, I love it. Like, I love shooting heroin, and smoking crack is pretty great too. But today I wouldn't go back to it, because what I've gotten as a result of sobriety is way better.
Yeah. And
someone that's just coming off of using, that's a hard concept to grasp.
For sure.
It's a hard sell.
It really is.
It's a hard
But
sell.
by spending time, Tom often uses the word mentors. I'm always thinking sponsors, sponsees, this, that. But Tom always uses the word mentors. And the fact of the matter is, it's like you put a young man with the three of us, eventually I'm a believer that they're going to start to emulate what we are, so to speak.
Product of your environment.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
You show me your friends, I'll show you your future, Steve.
That's a true statement.
Yeah. Hey, you know what I thought of that we can maybe put on a t-shirt or something? You remember the movie Wedding Crashers?
Yes.
It's like sobriety crashers. Don't be a sobriety crasher or a recovery crasher.
Yeah.
You know? Like you're not going to show up to a wedding uninvited.
So what do you mean? Like, don't show up to someone's recovery uninvited?
Yeah, don't interject yourselves into somebody's recovery if it's not invited.
Steve was like,
No, I was just thinking. Me and a client had a conversation downstairs earlier about that, and being off social media, and because there's a lot of recovery crashers, if you will, coming in from the woodwork.
All right. Well, that was fun. I feel good. I feel better.
We're just, this episode, like, we're just, like Tom said earlier, we're very, very passionate. Mm-hmm. We want to see amazing outcomes. We really do. But sometimes the client just isn't ready. Sometimes the family just isn't ready. It goes back to the family could have done it all right. We could have done it all right. We still could have got the same result, but.
And again, I want to reiterate, because I know there's moms listening to this that are frequent listeners, and they're part of, I'll say it. It's the organization is Lit Living in the Trenches, which is a great organization. If you can, somehow become a part of it, or I think they're on Instagram. Well, I know they're on Instagram, but it's a good support group. And there's some moms on there that listen to this podcast, every single one that comes out. We're not talking to you. All right. So please don't think that we're talking to you. You guys are doing phenomenal.
Y'all are awesome.
Yeah. And, we're obviously glad to help and glad to assist and everything. And
I always tell the moms, when I get them on the phone, I got a mom, I'm like, don't worry, ma'am. Nothing scares me more than a mama bear. Yeah. Like when I say we're going to deliver on our ends, like I am doing everything because, man, whew.
I mean, we have, if you really think about it, what we're put at task to do is extremely, not a lot of people can do it, in terms of facilities. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, somebody's probably thinking to themselves, well, I wonder what their success rate is. I have no idea,
I just told someone else that today too. Don't ask me a success rate. I'm not going to give you a percentage.
Yeah.
I can't.
I could sit here and try and explain to you why, but just know that we track our clients for a very long time, not because we have some sort of GPS on them, but they stay in contact with us. And that's why Steve is in charge of all that and does a phenomenal job. But honestly, it doesn't involve much from our end on an operational standpoint, because they stay in contact with us because they develop bonds with us.
Yeah.
And it is really like a family type atmosphere. And with that is the good and the bad. I'll talk to our clients here like they're my brother or they're my sister or they're my son. You know what I mean?
Dude, I love it with Tom. What the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah, it's like
they appreciate that, though.
But they
do.
respect it, and there's also the aspect of the therapeutic component. And I tell them, look, if you want to get deep down, dark emotional, I'm not your guy. We got 3 therapists over there that are licensed that can all help. They can help you with all that. So it's a good balance, but most important, why we wanted to record this, or why I wanted to, and I just told these 2 yahoos to be a part of it, is parents need to understand their role within somebody's recovery journey.
And this is good news. Not to cut you off, but this is good news.
It is.
I mean, it's like the surrender. One of the first moments of peace I had was surrendering that to the process. Your loved one comes here, your son or daughter, that's a good thing that they're here, and that you don't have to, we'll help you, we'll coach you up on what to do, and we'll provide those tools for communication. But that's a good thing. You don't have to. You're in the solution now. You just have to take suggestions.
Well, and just like Ben, you said, the worst day of your addiction was the day your mom found Al-Anon. I bet if your mom was here right now, which we should have her on at some point.
Yeah.
That would be fire
I
podcast.
bet the best day of her whatever addiction, I suppose, to you, was the day that she found Al-Anon.
Yeah.
She probably sings from the hilltops to what Al-Anon has done for her.
What's funny is now my dad, when my mom goes out of town, my dad will still go to the meetings on his own.
Yeah.
That she used to drag him to. And he even chairs. They actually just went to Tampa this past weekend for Al-Anon, their conference.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've gotten super involved with it, which is because my dad, he's on the surface, he's not the I'm going to Al-Anon parent.
Well, most men aren't.
Exactly. I'm glad you said most men aren't, because you just gave moms a lot of accolades on here. I actually this week had 2 great interactions with some dads. Literally did exactly what we're talking about. I was talking to them on the phone, and they called in. They had one thing that they wanted to comment on. One of them was a medical thing, and the other one was the dad had I forget what the other case was. But I was like, okay, well, we're gonna ask you to take a back seat. Thank you for the. And they're like, oh no, I won't be calling you again. If you need something from us, you call us. And
Perfect.
I that's what I said. I was like, wow, all right.
Yeah.
So they're we definitely want you at family weekend. Our therapist will be in touch. And these dads relinquish control. Very first conversation I had with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So kudos to the dads out there too.
Yeah, dads, but we're also talking to you too, because there's dads out there that are just as bad. So,
For sure.
All right. Well, that's it. I think that was a good episode. If any of you listeners happen to live in the Big Bend area in the west coast of Florida, knuckle down or hunker down. They got that big storm coming.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a Category 3.
Yeah.
Which sea level's so low over there. And they just got walloped last year.
Yeah, it's going a little bit north of Fort Myers, Sanibel Island area, but they're going to be on the dirty side, because it runs counterclockwise.
And you know where we're getting hit?
What?
You know where we're getting hit? Homeowners insurance.
Oh,
dude, every time a hurricane hits Florida,
I know.
My rates go up, dude.
Yep.
It's the worst.
It's the price you pay to live in paradise.
Life on life's terms.
You grew up here though, so this is
born and raised.
I told you earlier, I don't get out of bed for anything under a 4.
Category 4.
It is what it is.
Did you do the hurricane parties and all that stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're getting high and stuff, it doesn't really.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Every day is a party, but in terms of when I was not getting high and there was a hurricane, there was just honestly our bad hurricanes is for whatever reasons when I was in active addiction.
Yeah, hurricane parties were always good. So we would throw drinking parties, and it sounds like a great idea. During a storm, everyone's drinking under candlelight partying, the power goes out. The worst part is when the power stays out and the next day you're hungover, the showers don't work, there's no AC.
Yeah,
it's extra effort to cook everything. You're like, oh my God, when was this a good idea?
No, yeah, that sounds awful.
That and what's the one that hit Louisiana?
That was Katrina.
Katrina. I always joke about this one because all the beer that was supposed to go to that area, all the trucks came to Florida. Do you remember this? They were selling cases of Budweiser for $3.
No, I don't
24
remember that.
packs.
Oh man, I missed that boat.
So me and my buddy Billy, dude, we got his pickup truck, fit it with as many cases of beer as possible. It was like a wall.
That's
$3 a case. I'll never forget. We thought we hit the lotto, dude, but we had
I
so
feel
much
like you
beer
can get
that
a
it
case of
went stale.
Budweiser right now for $3. I had to throw that in.
You did.
Anyways. All right, guys. Well, appreciate it. And that is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. And in the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us, Tom at realrecoverytalk.com and Ben at realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. Right, Ben?
That is correcto mundo, Tom.
All right. That is it. We will see y'all later.